And we're ready. We've got 23. Okay, well, welcome everybody to the first online PD session for the Waikato and Bay of Plenty Network of Expertise. I'm Andrew Marshall, and I am the Kaiarahi for the region. I'm really excited with the number of people who have registered for this. It's really cool. We've got people from Northland to Invercargill. We do even have someone from overseas, which we're very excited about. This webinar is being recorded. And at the end, you will be emailed with a feedback form, as well as information about how to access the recording. During the webinar, remember that if you do have any questions, we're really keen to hear them as we go. So shoot them on to us via the chat on Zoom. If we don't get to answer all your questions, we will do that by email later this week. So, I'm joined by Ruby Grant, who currently teaches at Ngaruahia High School. She's been a teacher at Rototuna Senior High for the last 2 years. Also Zoe Chaves, who is currently in her first year studying engineering at Waikato University. She's also an ex-student of Rototuna Senior High. I was also teaching at Rototuna Senior High until last year, and I was the curriculum leader of maths at that time. So, first, a little bit of background about the school. The senior high opened in the north of Hamilton 3 years ago with the intention of being an innovative modern school where we were encouraged as teachers to try new things and take risks. So what is an innovative learning environment? Well, our whole school is open plan with breakout rooms. All the academic teaching is done in integrated modules with numbers of students ranging from 20 to 50, and each module has 2 teachers. Lessons were held in 90-minute blocks. So what I've described there is generally what we consider to be the definition of a modern learning environment. My personal opinion, of course, is that a truly modern or innovative environment for learning has no walls at all. It's the great wide world. Obviously schools are not quite ready yet to take that sort of revolutionary jump, but anyway, we will take the earlier definition. So tonight we're going to share some of the highlights of teaching and learning in that way, and also the challenges that there have been for us. I would like to very briefly show you some of the research that's actually just come out this month about modern learning environments in primary schools at this stage. But I'd like to start first with Ruby. Perhaps you'd like to describe what some of the highlights have been for you teaching at Rototuna. You arrived after having spent 2 years teaching at quite a traditional school. Mm-hmm. So how was it for you?
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Yeah, so my first 2 years of teaching, I worked at Onehunga High School, which is in sort of south central Auckland. Which is a traditional sort of siloed classroom, one teacher in a classroom with about 30 students. So I visited Rototuna and I immediately just thought it was the coolest place. For a start, the school itself is a purpose-built, as Andrew said, modern learning environment. And so it was really interesting. It had lots of innovative spaces in this big open plan area, which seems like it had lots of potential. The idea as well of co-teaching, that really appealed to me when I applied for the job. Mm-hmm. So that was really cool. So for me, this modern learning environment, I guess a couple of highlights. First of all is the flexibility. So I found the most amazing flexibility to use all of the spaces all the way around us. Because we were a school of years 7 to 13, we had a huge area, like massive grounds. There was even a playground, like a high school with a playground.
It was great, honestly. The flying fox was the best.
So cool. So lots and lots of like purpose-built environments, you know, and because there isn't really a set location for your class, you get to basically go wherever there's a space and you think it would work out, and use breakout areas and put different students in different places. Being able to co-teach as well, and being able to say take a group of students and your co-teacher can take another student. It really meant that you had a lot more possibilities with your teaching that you would have otherwise, I think. The second highlight for me was I really love the collaborative environment. So this is something that Andrew talks about a lot. It's really amazing just being able to wander around the space and you just see everyone teaching, because you're just walking through the teaching areas. And, you know, like here's Hannah teaching chemistry, and then you go around here and here's Jason taking a statistics class. And you really pick up on, it's basically like amazing professional development. I guess like back in a traditional classroom, you'd probably only go and watch someone teach, I don't know, you know, once, trying as much as you can, but maybe like once a term, twice a term if you're lucky. But you're constantly watching other people teach, and also people are constantly watching you, which I think is kind of a cool environment, because your lessons become a bit more open. People can walk past and say, oh, this is an interesting idea, or have you thought about how it applies to this? So
and I'll just say that depending on the willingness of the teachers involved, like I was happy for a teacher passing by to stop and call out in front of the class to me and say, oh, by the way, did you know that ties in with PE in this way? And I'd do the same. If it was teachers who I knew were willing to handle that, I'd be walking past the class and I'd stop and something would get my interest, and I'd say, oh, by the way, did you know maths comes into this and that area, rah, rah, rah. And of course the kids love that informality, I think. But it takes time to get used to it.
But it is really exciting, because I feel like we're always talking about how we need to work together and we need to collaborate and we need to work across departments. But when you are all teaching in the same place, it just happens. Like you know what the English are up to, and you know what this is up to. So so I think for me those are the main highlights. And I just loved co-teaching. Co-teaching was just my favorite thing. I absolutely loved it. I love having someone to bounce off. Loved having that flexibility of like being able to pop in or pop out or take some students out.
Also, these are integrated lessons, so we're talking about a maths teacher and a teacher from another subject. So as far as bouncing ideas off, you're bouncing ideas off someone who may not know your subject that well, and so you're getting a fresh view on your subject from an adult point of view rather than the students, which can be very, very valuable. Obviously it takes time, it takes willingness as well to take part in that sort of thing. But absolute highlight.
Brings a lot of energy into the room, eh?
Absolutely. Yep.
I always loved it when you guys interrupted our classes. Like it was just, not just because you're interrupting classes, obviously, but you know, you just have different perspectives. And I don't know, it was just nice to have all the teachers just coming into the space. There's a bunch of students who sometimes would, you know, just kind of pop in and listen to other classes. It was really great.
That's fun.
Can you think of other highlights from your point of view, maybe personally, Zoe, but also from the point of view of what you knew of other students generally? What did they feel? Did they feel, and maybe you might like to reflect on some students who were new to the school and weren't used to that sort of setup. That might have been a shock to them, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe they suddenly fitted in. What sort of things did you find highlights wise?
Oh, okay. So for me personally, I came from a background of homeschooling. I was homeschooled for around 4 years before we moved to New Zealand, and straight after that, I went straight into year 10 in the junior side. And what happened was I found that you just needed to be quite independent at learning. Like the teachers were obviously there to support you. They were there to teach you, but because the classes were open plan and they're big classes, they're not completely quiet like a single cell classroom would be. Like you just had to learn how to work independently. And I think that would probably be the biggest hurdle for some people and for some newer students who are coming from more traditional like style of school. You don't have someone as much leaning over your shoulder. And I think when you have students in neat little rows, it's kind of easy to tell which one isn't paying attention. And it's hard to hide that a little bit more when you're in an open plan classroom. But I think that's definitely what I learned a lot.
Thanks for that. I'm just going to share here the picture of a typical layout of the learning space at Rototuna, and the school is 2 levels, very similar. So what you're seeing here in that picture, hopefully, is the learning space right down the whole length of the building, and you could have several lessons going on at any one time throughout that space. You can see there are breakout spaces which are not so obvious there, but beyond the stairwell you'll see some windows there. All the interior windows and the exterior windows are double glazed, so a breakout space in here is very, very quiet. So there are areas where you can actually take students, if they don't suit that type of learning and the noise or whatever, they can move into a breakout space.
And I found those breakout spaces were quite helpful for workshops because with varying levels of skill, like some students would prefer to have a recap on, like, for example, redox reactions. So they'd have a recap and our teacher would offer it, but not everyone would want to take it. So that's when you could kind of say to the class, hey, we're going to we're going to look at redox again. If you want to come in, just go to the breakout space. And it's really flexible like that.
I guess can I talk about a low light now?
Absolutely.
It's not a low light, it's a challenge. So I think like what Zoe's just brought up, the idea of flexibility, I think it's the blessing and the curse, right? So I think because as well the space lends itself so well to use lots of technology, I think the big classes and the big space, it makes it really, really, really easy for students who want to be lost to get lost, right? Like it's very easy to lose yourself behind a screen. It's very easy to lose yourself in a class of 60 people. It's much harder than you can in a class of 30 people. And I think as well, our style of teaching, which it was because of the space and because of the co-teaching and just, I guess, because of our ethos there, it was very much like, I'm offering a tutorial, come and get it if you want it, but I'm not going to force you to come and get the tutorial. And so I think along with that, I think I found that I didn't build as much of close relationships with students in those really large classes. And I think because of that lack of relationship, I think I did lose those students a little bit. I didn't quite have the keep a tab on them the way I would. And so I found that the hardest thing, I think.
I would think the hardest thing for me was working with other teachers who have quite different styles. It was also partly a highlight for me, but you do need to find time to sit down with the teacher, to get to know them, to get to know what they prefer in a classroom situation, because of course almost all of the staff came from traditional classrooms. One teacher, one group of students, 4 walls, very small space. And so we have to get to know each other and have to work out, well, how are you going to react if I suddenly say, right, those kids who are interested in that all of a sudden, let's go over here, come with me, I'll grab a whiteboard and we'll go into a bit more detail of that and leave the other teacher to do something else with the others. You know, there's a lot of work that has to happen with another teacher. So meeting times, I think, are still one of the biggest things that determine the success of working in one of these types of modern learning environments. So I'll just, while we have a short break there, remind you, if you do have any questions that you want to send through, feel free to fire them through on the chat now, or wait till the end and we can have a question session then. Zoe, you mentioned something last time when we were talking about this, about how you felt it was needed that students had to develop independent learning skills. And you told me that you saw students who automatically just responded and all of a sudden, yep, they had to. And so they did. You did mention, of course, that there were students who weren't doing that. And therefore, do you feel from a student's point of view that they were probably achieving less than if they were in a traditional school? Or what do you think? Okay,
that's a good question. I think with any student, there's a limit to how much you can push them to do. So like generally, most students would adapt pretty quickly. They would just be like, oh, okay, this teacher isn't going to, follow up on me every single minute of every single day. If I want to get work done, I've got to do it myself. But the thing is, if there's a student who just does not want to do work, I don't think it matters if you put them in a jail cell. They will not do work. Like if you, that's a weird way to put it. But if you put them in any environment, they're not going to work. And I think that's something to do more with just finding a way to motivate students to learn. And that's a whole other can of worms that we could talk ages about. But I think generally most people would find different ways to to help them cope with, if it's noise, sometimes they would put headphones in. If it's they needed to sit away from some people, they'd find a beanbag in the corner, work on their laptop and stuff like that. But it was flexible. It worked for most people, I think. Yeah.
I think I actually want to jump in here and follow on what you've said, Zoe, about that student, the self-management skills. But we've just had a really great question.
Oh, yep.
Love a good question.
Okay, so the question says, sorry if I missed this one, but is the meeting time part of the teaching of the course, or was this allocated use of your non-contact time? Also, are you teaching one class as a pair, e.g. level 2 maths, or would the pair teach 2 or 3 classes together, i.e. working more as a team? I might have to reread that second part. I'll go to the first part of the question. Is the meeting time part of the teaching of the course? And actually, no, it's not. In fact, the contact time we have would be the same as the contact time in a traditional school, and we've got to find meeting time outside of our contact time. So our non-contact time, as it is in a traditional school, is time where we can then plan and therefore schedule meetings with other teachers to plan our sessions. Yep.
So your non-contact time was essentially contact time.
Well, it's non-contact as in non-contact with students. But
I would still find you though and bug you and ask questions. Yeah.
Don't say that. But yeah, absolutely, we are open, of course, to students at any time. But no, that is a good question, and it's definitely something that plays in the mind of teachers when they're considering doing this, because you have to become very efficient at having meetings. Both have to be in agreement about how the meetings run. So when you begin planning a module, you have to sit down with that teacher and talk about, okay, how are we going to work together? How are we going to have meetings? How are we going to communicate? And if we need an emergency meeting, is that okay? Or is that a no-no? Can I email you after 5 p.m. or is that a no-no? And so on. There's a lot of collaboration.
Saying that though, building on what Andrew said, I think it does in some ways depend on your style of teaching. I am lucky in that I don't generally do a vast amount of planning, but I did find that, but I'm still very, very good.
Improv, I think.
Improv, yeah, I've got other skills. But I think with that planning, I found with me, and I think with others, we had a lot of planning at the beginning of the module. We would sit down and would map up exactly what we were going to do and what we were going to do, and intensely plan for the first 3 or 4 weeks. But after that, I found that things would just roll along, and after the first 4 or 5 weeks, we generally got by with like a 10-minute chat. And so there is more planning at the start, but I think towards the end it does, it decreases.
And I would just say to that, it's different for different teachers. Definitely, when you have done the work behind the scenes with that teacher and you know them well, then yes, your meetings can become much more efficient and short as time goes on. I have seen things go in reverse, where actually almost the communication breaks down and you have teachers meeting and planning while they're teaching in the classroom, because they haven't found any other time to meet up, and they suddenly realize, oh, we need to talk about this. Let's talk about it now. Quick, let's get the students doing something. So that's probably almost like a worst case scenario of that situation. And to attempt to answer the second part of that question, you probably would be best to register, if you haven't already, to the second webinar coming up in 2 weeks' time, where Jason Sharma and I will sit down and talk about just how did we integrate maths with different subjects. So that's coming up. That's probably the best thing to say, I think, is to leave that one. I will reread that question a bit later, though. If there's more I can add to that, I will email you.
As a little teaser, Jason taught my year 11 class where we did PE and maths, and he combined stats and Morocco, which was really, really cool. Fun. Yeah, I think if you can get him to talk about that.
He will be, for sure. Yeah, cool. Right, we have a question. How long have you been implementing cross-curricular integrated seniors? How do you work with NCA standards?
That's a good question there.
Yeah, very good question. And we've been doing it since the school started 3 years ago. So for 3 years, we have been integrating NCEA at in the first year, we did it with level 1. In the second year, we had year 11s and year 12. Oh, actually, sorry, no, that's not right. In the first year, we had year 11s. In the second year of the school, the year 11s became year 12s, and we got another lot of year 11s on. But of course, we are teaching at Rototuna level 2 over 2 years. So even in year 11, we are focusing on level 2 skills as a goal, basically over 2 years. So third year, of course, we've got year 13s, which was last year. Therefore, we had year 11s, 12s, and 13s. And I forgot what the question was.
Yeah, I think.
How long? Oh, yeah. Well, 3 years we've been doing that all along, integrating. So that's a lot of work. And again, Jason and I will talk about that in a coming webinar. But it's a lot of work in working out which subjects can go together, how to get students to choose the right thing for their pathway, and how the standards fit in, and so on.
But I think, like, to answer that question as someone who was, so Andrew was at the school right from the start, and so he's had a lot of experience in setting all of this up. But when I came along as just a teacher, I at first I was like, how is this going to work? How are we going to make this course cross-curricular and have NCA standards that are meshed together? But it really works. Like, NCA is incredibly flexible.
That's true.
Like, yeah, and when you read down into the standard and you read the clarifications, you realize that, like, the possibilities for different types of assessment and different types of context is basically infinite. And so I think, like, if you have a sound working knowledge of the ins and the outs of the standards, you can do almost anything, and you can assess it in almost any way that you want. So I presented at the NZ AMT conference 2 years ago, and I talked about this in more detail. So maybe I could send my slideshow through to you. But but like, I've had a lot of success in assessing standards that are normally taught as tests, but more as like portfolios, or the students might make a video, or they might like do a project, or they might create an artwork, and just documenting some of the thinking behind that goes into the evidence against the standard. And it's really fun. That's probably one of my other favorite things about about this type of teaching.
Yeah, I think that highlights also that with our school, as an innovative school, we've combined a lot of different innovations. Whereas I know there are schools who are like dipping their toes in the water with their year 9s and 10s of trying to integrate, or not integrating, but trying open plan spaces or whatever. We've kind of attempted to do all the things all in one go, which to some extent work when you're doing all of those things together. It would, I imagine, it could be quite difficult to do one of those things at a time. Yeah, interesting.
And with one of these questions, I think what happens with most teachers is, even though you get paired up in one class, you generally get mixed up all over again, and you've got to work with basically more different types of people. I think you've worked with pretty much every subject, haven't you guys?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think everyone except English, because English and maths were
still separate, right?
Compulsory, so they were still separate in modules. But yeah, I partnered up with so many different subjects. And again, I think the question was, I was really asking if you collaborated with one other teacher for lots of classes. No, that's not the case. It would be one particular teacher for that particular module, and a teacher would have 1, 2, or 3 modules at any one time, depending on their workload and other responsibilities. So it could, if they had 3 modules, that teacher would be working with 3 different teachers for each of those modules.
Yeah, and the way students chose their stuff was, normally in a traditional school you'd have 6 subjects around there. So in our school we'd choose 3, and basically it would be like English and drama, or maths and PE, or I don't know, history and geography. So there would be your 3 classes, but all of them had your 6 subjects. So that's kind of how it worked. And they'd swap it around halfway through the year. So halfway through the year you'd have one set of classes, next half of the year you'd have another set of classes. And that's just for some background of how students chose their subjects. Yeah,
good information. And hopefully if Jason and I have time, we might go into a bit more detail of just how that works, because the logistics is so different to a traditional school, particularly timetabling and so on. Yeah, I could talk all night about that. One thing I'm not sure if we mentioned, but noise is something that comes up big time in criticisms about these styles of teaching. what's it like from your point of view? Noise.
Well, this is a good place to bring in your research, because this could be a good segue. So I'll just say a little bit about noise, but basically what I found is that kind of like anything, it really works really well for some students and other students can't cope. So I think the majority of students are pretty fine, and a few students who really can't handle noise find it incredibly difficult. Yeah,
and well, from my point of view, the first year we did not have a full load of students, so we had big space, very few students. Noise was not an issue. The building is designed well from an acoustics point of view, which may be an issue if you're trying to turn a traditional school into a open plan school. I've heard those issues before. Ours was purposely built, so the acoustics were pretty good. However, there were occasions where one class would be down one end of the building, another class down there. They were doing something very loud and the sound just went boom all the way.
Sorry, that was probably our drama class.
Not a lot you can do about that, and it can be frustrating at times. But like you said, that's why breakout spaces are so important. You could split up the class to go into other quieter spaces, but it can be an issue. Yes.
And
definitely.
I think it's less noisy than most people think. Like I was a student ambassador, and I'd bring like parents and other teachers around, and they'd always be shocked with how quiet it was. Like you'd have the humming of people, like imagine an office or like an IT building where you'd have the general hum of people, someone going up to the printer, you'd hear someone talking, but it's not overwhelming, I don't think. At least that's just for me. And whenever I need the quiet space, like you said, there were the breakout rooms, and I think it just taught me to work with headphones, honestly, and taught me how to put my head down and focus. Yeah.
Yep, for sure. And I think if noise was ever to be a big issue, it's probably because the teacher is trying to address the whole class of 50 students at once. And I know that I've recommended to teachers that they never attempt to give any useful information to the whole class all at once. Hence why it lends itself to digital learning, but also you need to split off groups and talk with a small group. It was very clear in a lot of observations where if a teacher did attempt to speak to all 50 or 60 students, that there was a big chunk at the back that weren't taking it in and weren't caring either about whether they took it in. So yeah, from a noise point of view, it almost causes you to be more aware of who's taking in your information and what to do about making sure they get it. Smaller groups. Yeah. So I'm just going to share this. Hopefully this works. How do I go to my screen? Yeah, there. Now this is some research that's just been released this month by the New Zealand Council of Educational Research. It is just primary school teachers that they have interviewed, 337 teachers, but the important thing is this is the first research that is being done, and we're hoping more will be done, secondary schools in particular. And these are teachers' opinions. Some students find modern learning environments overwhelming. So we've got a majority there agreeing or strongly agreeing. And you can read through that yourself. What I will do at the end of this later this week is I'll include a link to this research in the email that I send out to all of you who have joined us, so you can have a bit more of a closer read of this information. But it does point out noise being quite an issue.
Yeah, and I guess the other point to note too is that so our school is split into a senior and a junior school, and I have heard from almost everyone that the junior school is a lot louder than the senior school.
It's true.
And so I'm just kind of wondering, you know, like perhaps for some groups of students, like maybe younger students, or I guess younger students, or louder students, modern learning environments are more difficult, but I guess.
Well, that's a good question that perhaps Zoe can fill us in there, because I haven't spent a lot of time at the junior high. When I've gone over there to observe, it does appear to be very loud, and a lot of students in a smaller space in the senior high. But noise from your point of view at the junior high?
So when I went there, it was less bordering on capacity, and I think they definitely had more space. I think that might be a separate problem because I feel, at least in the junior high, they've been really struggling just getting classroom spaces. It's because the school is zoned and they can't exactly cap it at the moment, so they can't stop people from enrolling. So what they've done is they've tried different ways. They've gotten rid of lockers. They've changed some of the furniture around. They've actually gotten rid of a few breakout rooms as well and put down some walls and put up other walls to try combat the issue. That one is more to do with space. But if you've got enough space, like in the senior side, noise won't be as much of an issue, I don't think. Yeah.
Yep.
I hope that answers it.
Yeah, as best we can, really. We've got a very good question here, looking at more of the nuts and bolts. How did it work with external standards? Calculus, about level 3 calculus, level 2, 3 science, chemistry, bio, etc. Has your workload increased with regard to moderation, pre-moderating tasks, internal moderation, etc.? And that's a definite yes to that. The workload has increased. The work satisfaction when you've completed that has also increased, because nothing is better than creating this task that is, in many cases, a joint task, 2 subjects being assessed with the same task. In some cases, that's what our goal was, to try to do that, because that's what NCA want us to do. They want us to cut down the amount of assessment, cut down the amount of evidence gaining, and be more efficient. But yes, it was quite a demand on teachers arriving at the school, where in many cases, if they've come from a traditional school, they would have a folder full of assessments that they can just flick through and grab from the last 10 years, whatever, and throw that in front of the students and say, right, do this and we'll give you the credits. That could not happen at Rototuna, simply because the assessment was in the context of the module, as in an integrated module with maths and PE, or maths and food technology, or whatever. So every module had to have specifically written assessment tasks for it, and that took time, but it was the best professional development a new teacher could have at the school. They were thrown in at the deep end and taught how to float, basically. This is how we do it, this is what matters, and this is what we're looking for, this is what we're assessing, and this is why we're assessing. Let's do it as efficiently as we can, and it takes time. Yes. That's what I've got to say about that, really.
And it's also really fun. I think, like, writing tasks is I love it. The other part of that question was about external standards. So we basically wrapped up, we did 2 semesters. So like Zoe mentioned, that classes would change about a third of the way through the year. So we'd do 2 semesters. And then in term 4, we would do like a pathways oriented course and do a whole lot of life skills. And during that time, students would they would have been studying for externals previously in their classes, but they'd really knuckled down and studied for externals from then onwards.
I think it was quite good though, because we had one of the concerns was for students who weren't taking any externals, because there were quite a few people who managed to get through NCA, and they didn't. Well, you don't really need externals to get through NCA. You can get credits from interns and all that. But so for students who didn't have as many externals, the external prep was really helpful, because they could go. There would be like field trips to engineering places. They'd bring people in from like businesses and try have these separate classes that weren't to do with credits, but they're more to do with just like you said, pathways.
And learning stuff.
Learning other stuff. I think, Andrew, you did one on car mechanics, right? If I wasn't doing externals, I would have gone to that.
And part of, when the school was formed, part of our philosophy was, I got to put this in the right words, to make sure students were comfortable as possible about the way that they were being assessed. We had students who were just going to be so freaked out by exam pressure, there's no point in assessing them with an external exam. So we would do, in a design of our curriculum, what we could to avoid doing that. And therefore, we didn't have as many students sitting externals. That in a nutshell kind of like encompasses the philosophy of the school. Yet we still have comparable overall NCA results. So I think that's one of the big successes of the school, actually, is to allow students a bit more flexibility in the way that they're assessed, and to open teachers' eyes to that type of assessment. Yeah.
And I think it made students more aware of what credits they were getting. So I know some students would be like, I don't want any externals. So they'd actually work quite hard to make sure they chose classes with internals, and they'd keep track. They'd say, oh, I can't fail this one because I need this for English and I need this for my literacy credits. So I think, yeah, that flexibility of the students being able to say, I don't want to do it this way. I'm going to make sure I can find a solution for myself. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of listeners are probably trying to work this out in their heads, but you probably need to know a little bit more about how our calendar worked throughout the year, as in we had 3 semesters. The first 2 semesters were these modules, so a student will have done 6 modules in the first 2 semesters. The third semester, which was mostly exam preparation for those doing the externals, but other students were able to catch up in areas that they might need to. We did try to shy away from that, because again, that's going against our philosophy of just handing out internal assessment because they needed the credits. So again, we tried to link that in with pathways as well. But yeah, it's not simple. There was a lot of amazing, I was going to say jiggery pokery. That's the best word I could find for how to put that together. And thanks to our deputy principal who put in the time to, to make those logistics work. And
We've got a good question there, actually.
Yeah.
Sorry, you go ahead.
So this question is overcoming. So before I said that, at times, because there is a big focus on students' self-management skills, at times teachers will often offer workshops or offer things, and because it's a really large class, they are sort of opt-in, opt-out, right? Like, and the question is, how do we overcome students not doing this and basically not coming along to tutors, not asking for help, not doing the work? I think that's the really difficult thing. Like when you have a really large class, that also pushes a bit more of that management burden onto the students. The students have to ask for help. They have to contact the teacher, because when you're keeping track of 60 students, you don't know in as much detail how they're all doing. So the answer for that is you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I think just making it really clear what the course expectations are, and making it really clear what this tutorial will entail and what it will help with, and if students, I think the key to that self-management is that ownership of their learning, and really pushing that from the get-go helps.
Yeah, and I think from a student's perspective, teachers have got to be, I'm so sorry, you've got to be consistent with saying, hey, if you need this, I've got this tutorial, I've got this video that will help you. If you miss out on this tutorial, I'll record it for you. And what I find is, there are times where I personally would be at the start of a class and think, oh, I don't need to look at that. But then I'd realize my mistake and think, crap, I sure as hell hope there's a video or something that I can do. So I think it's just, it matters so much, the approachability of our teachers. So I found that I've been able to get along with a lot of our teachers just because they're so open. They care quite a lot about us just as people. And that personal connection is really what helps students to say, hey, I'm sorry I slacked off a bit, but can I come back and can I take this and try to do it better? And I think with some teachers, I guess that's what's great about having 2 in one class, because I found if there's one teacher that I don't particularly get along with, I can always go to someone else. And that's what's good about when we have to choose our own modules, because you guys have to work with so many different teachers, and all the classes get mixed up so much that I've worked with almost every teacher in school. And I found that's just helped me, because, for example, if I need help with calculus, but I know Andrew's got a busy week, I can go to Jason, or I can go to Ruby. And I've just found that, there's so many different perspectives and so many different people there to help. And you definitely helped me a lot. I wouldn't be where I am without
It's interesting that one thing mentioned in the research, that all the teachers in the research were able to make comments about what they thought made effective modern learning environments work. And that was one of the things, is because the students are seeing all the teachers all the time, all the teachers are seeing all the students, even if it's informally, in passing, there are much better relationships able to be formed. Therefore, students are more willing to approach different teachers if their teacher that they need is not available. And I think that's absolutely vital, that there is that openness. And it shows you that the mentality that the teacher brings to the learning environment, they've got to be open-minded about that. And it's not just my class of 26 students that I'm building a relationship with. It's all students at this institution that we are connecting with and being open with.
Yeah, because I mean, if I was in a theoretical classroom where I didn't appreciate how I was being taught, I would just go to another teacher that I knew who taught the same subject. I've heard stories from my friends like that, and that's honestly what students do. If they feel like they can't approach someone, they'll just go to someone else, or they'll slack off.
We've got an interesting question here regarding the modules. How long did you prepare them? Do you have the modules ready before you implemented the integrated curriculum? I'm expecting the teacher working with another teacher prepared for the modules. Yeah, and that's that again, thanks to amazing foresight, I guess, of the deputy principals who are attempting to help us organize ourselves as curriculum leaders to try to make this happen. It happened a long time in advance. Like there was timetabled at not even towards the end of the year, but during the second half of the year for that first semester of the following year, where we had to start looking at, okay, possible combinations. How are we with our overviews, and we had 2 or 3 year plans each curriculum to try to fit in with another subject area. We had to look at teacher combinations, who would work well, and a nice spread of subject as well. So yes, a lot of time needs to go in well beforehand so that combinations are set up, and we've got time to look at it and discuss it with our teams of teachers, and then decide, is this going to work? Yes. But still, even with days to go before modules started, there were comings and goings of teachers and changes that had to be accommodated. As you will know, at the beginning of the year, many changes happen. So we did a lot of work beforehand, but also we had to be very flexible and, you know, react at a moment's notice to change things as well. So not easy overall, is it? Okay, now that's 45 minutes. I think we will start to bring it to a close. But one thing I would like to say is that we are intending having a conference, combined Waikato Bay of Plenty conference at the end of the year. There's opportunities for us to do a similar presentation there. I'm going to be sending out this feedback form to everybody in an email with links to that research and links to any other information that we think would be worthwhile. I'd like to thank Zoe and Ruby for setting aside their time tonight to come in and talk about it. Also thank all of you for registering and showing your interest, because that's the way these things continue, is you showing your interest. And of course, Jason and I will be talking in 2 weeks' time. By the way, many of you who I know are watching now have registered for that one with Jason. Jason and I will be doing a second repeat the following week. There are some teachers in the Waikato who won't be able to attend that first one, so we'll be doing a second repeat. Also, last plug is the third one, I'm hoping to be a webinar specifically for maths teachers who are beginning teachers or provisionally registered teachers. So get the word out there. If you're at a school with beginning teachers, get them to get in touch with me. They can email me directly, or just look out for when the information comes about that. And look forward to doing some more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, no problem.
Thanks, Andrew.
I'll just do a quick check. Any final questions? Been helpful. Thank you. Awesome.
Thank you guys for coming.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Right. See you next time.
See ya.
Bye.